Good morning to colleagues in New York, and good afternoon from Cairo and Jeddah and the other part of the world. Welcome to all of our distinguished keynote speakers, panelists, convening partners, and all attendees today. Thank you all for taking time to attend this side event on capacity building for female refugees on the margins of the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. This topic, colleagues, under discussion today is of utmost importance to all stakeholders within the OIC system, globally and in the Women Development Organization in particular, as these discussions will give us an insight about the different policies, programs, and initiatives on empowering female refugees within the OIC member states and the lessons learned. Of course, for those of you who does not know the Women Development Organization, or WDO, for many years, the OIC faced serious challenges in its efforts to promote gender equality, in particular because of the presence of no single recognized driver to direct its activities on gender equality and empowerment of women issues. More than 35 entities within the system were working on women's rights, so efforts were scattered and overlapping sometimes. Creating the Women Development Organization was crucial to address such challenges, and WDO started its operations in August 2021 from its headquarters in Cairo. So WDO is the center of gender equality architecture in the OIC that is assigned with bringing together resources and mandates for greater impact, merging and building on the important work of the different entities and agencies of OIC, and above all of them is the OIC Secretariat, which worked previously on gender equality and women's empowerment issues. WDO has a quadruple mandate that encompasses normative support and policy work, advocacy and outreach, coordination and operational activities. These four components are complementary to one another, seek to jointly advance gender equality and women's empowerment, and promote, protect, and fulfill the human rights for women and girls within OIC member states, as well as engage in cross-regional and global exchanges around the human rights of women and girls in WDO countries. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all in agreement that the growing socio-political changes around the world, and especially within the OIC countries, has led to an unprecedented large movement of people leaving their homes for fear of war or conflict as refugees or internally displaced. According to statistics from the United Nations and other international organizations, the majority of these refugees and displaced are women and children, women representing almost half of the refugee population worldwide. They face numerous challenges during the journey for safety and when finding a new place to call home, including protection risks in transit, family separation, psychosocial stress and trauma, health complications, particularly for pregnant women, physical harm and injury, and risks of exploitation and trafficking, as well as gender-based violence. Women and girls on the move, therefore, need a comprehensive special protection and support mechanisms which can be achieved through global commitments that include achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls as its underlying principles. Okay, and now what are the purposes of today's panel discussion? Today's panel discussion will try to understand the importance of empowering refugee women through establishment of vocational training programs, discussing the efforts of the host communities, advise on potential partnerships and programs with the host communities that can lead to a successful future of the refugee and displaced women. Identify the necessary support for refugee women to gain the skills needed upon their return to their communities and communities of origin, discussing the best practices and the impact of current program in place to enhance the self-reliance of refugee women, encouraging the promotion of refugee women entrepreneurship by engaging the private sector. And most importantly, the outcome of these discussions today will help to further inform and enrich the conceptualization of future interventions that will greatly benefit our women and girls affected by conflicts. Allow me now, distinguished guests, to present to you our keynote speakers who will enrich our discussions today with their insights on the topic. I will now start by giving the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Mohammed Al-Atiq, Chargé d'Affaires of the Mission of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to the United Nations. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency, and good morning for everybody. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you all for attending today's event, which highlights such an important topic. And also, I would like to thank the organizers of this event, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Islamic Development Bank, and the Women Development Organization for their efforts and the cooperation in the preparation for this event. Excellencies, today's meeting and the discussion on capacity building for female refugees has a significant importance for two main reasons. First, during the current 2 weeks, the international community is focused on discussing achieving gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programs. Thus, the focus of the priority theme of this year's session of the CSW may overlook the needs and the continuous suffering of the female refugees around the world. Second, the challenges of climate change and environmental disasters that our world is facing nowadays, besides the dire consequences of COVID-19 pandemic, have exacerbated the situation of refugees, especially women and girls. Excellencies, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has been avid lender of generosity and humanitarian aid and a stalwart supporter of sister countries in the hardships. According to the United Nations Financial Tracking Service, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is ranked among the world top donors. This importance to the humanitarian aid is born out of the Kingdom's role as a key player on the global stage and the heart of the Islamic world. The Kingdom's contributions span many developing countries to whom humanitarian aid is provided through various governmental entities. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is one of the countries that most welcomed refugees from several Islamic countries. The kingdom provides them with free treatment and helps them to integrate into the society as they live in all regions of the kingdom, and provide them with opportunities to work and receive education in public schools. In addition, the kingdom supports refugees around the world who have suffered from forcible displacement due to various reasons. And the humanity identity of Saudi Arabia seeks to alleviate their suffering by providing them basics of a decent life, including housing, education, nutrition, and treatment through collaboration with different United Nations agencies. For example, as a supporter of the UNHCR, Saudi Arabia has supported the UNHCR with more than 25 million during 2021 and have implemented numerous projects that aimed to help and empower the most vulnerable refugees, such as women and girls in the city of Ib in southwestern Yemen, and also for Syrian women in refugees camp. Finally, because of women have a great role in shaping future generation, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is keen to rehabilitate and train women refugees all over the world. I welcome the participation of the distinguished panelists as we are looking forward to receiving their valuable inputs and interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. And as you listened and see, colleagues, that His Excellency tried to highlight the nexus of the priority theme of the CSW session on climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the issue of women refugees and displaced. He highlighted also the great efforts, the great and generous efforts by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in supporting the lives of refugees and displaced, with a special focus on women and girls and their rehabilitation process. So thank you very much, Excellency, for your insights. And we are honored today to have with us Ambassador Tarek, Assistant Secretary General of OIC for Humanitarian, Cultural and Social Affairs, a seasoned diplomat and expert in multilateral affairs with great experience in humanitarian affairs. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thanks, Fatima. Thanks very much for your kind words addressed to me. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Distinguished delegates, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. It gives me immense pleasure to address this distinguished virtual side event on capacity building for female refugees organized by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in cooperation with OIC, the OIC Human Development Organization, and the Islamic Development Bank on the sidelines of the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. At the outset, I would like to extend the gratitude and appreciation of the General Secretariat of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the host country of the OIC, for its commendable efforts in promoting women's status and empowerment in all fields, and for its active role in supporting the OIC goals and objectives towards preserving women's rights and enhancing their role in development across the OIC member states. Furthermore, the OIC General Secretariat deeply appreciates the leading role of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in providing relief humanitarian assistance to Muslim countries in hardship and in continuous support to provide Muslim refugees, particularly from Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and the Rohingya people. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today, with the escalation of conflicts, wars, and tensions around the world, the number of refugees is always in rise, with over 90.6 million refugees around the world. According to the UN Women data, women and girls makes up around 50% of the refugees population and internally displaced persons. Moreover, the number of refugees from OIC member states account for 61.5% of the total globally, with more than 25 million displaced people in host countries such as Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. Refugees and displaced women and girls are among the most vulnerable groups as they face specific challenges and protection risks in transit, including family separation, psychological stress and trauma, health complications, particularly for pregnant women, physical harm and injury, and risks of exploitation and gender-based violence. Women also often serve as the main caretakers for children, elderly family members, further deepening their need for protection and support to help them support their families and move on with their lives. Most of these women and girls lack the necessary training or job skills that can help them obtain a source of living and consequently their chances to be financially independent and empowered. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, empowering and supporting refugees and displaced women is among top priorities of the OIC. This is interpreted in Resolution 18/8 on the joint action to support and empower refugees and displaced women, which was adopted at the 8th session of the OIC Ministerial Conference on Women. held in Cairo, the Arab Republic of Egypt, July 2021. The said resolution stresses the importance of developing and strengthening comprehensive refugee response policies that benefit both refugees and the communities that host them. It also encourages OIC member states to establish vocational training programs and family support services with the support of the Islamic Development Bank, OIC Women Development Organization, chambers, and relevant NGOs to strengthen the role of women in society. Furthermore, the OIC Plan of Action for the Advancement of Women, or PAO, addresses a range of challenges faced by women and seeks to improve their status through a set of recommendations and partnerships. Furthermore, the newly established Human Development Organization, the first OIC specialized institution on the field of women empowerment and advancement, is considered as the center of women empowerment and advancement architecture of the OIC. The young yet highly compatible organization has a multiplying mandate that encompasses normative support and policy work, advocacy and outreach, coordination, and operational activities in order to advance gender equality, women empowerment, and promote, protect, and fulfill the human rights for women and girls in OIC member states. The OIC greatly relies on the role of the Women Development Organization as a major contributor to women's empowerment and a key player in ensuring the activation of women's role in the development process in member states. In this regard, I would like to take this opportunity to reiterate our call to all member states that have not yet ratified the statute of this organization to expedite the ratification process in order to become members of this important organization and benefit from all the programs and activities in the field of women empowerment. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we look forward that our important event today would highlight possible programs and initiatives that can facilitate decent living for women and girls refugees in conflict zones and refugee camps, particularly in OIC member states, and help them obtain sustainable source of income that will definitely make their lives much more secure and help them to be empowered and advanced. In conclusion, on behalf of the OIC General Secretariat and on my own behalf, I would like to once again thank the organizers, the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for co-sponsoring this important event in cooperation with OIC General Secretariat, IDB, and WDO. And I would like also to thank again all the distinguished speakers, panelists, and participants who have dedicated their time and effort to put their valuable knowledge, opinions, and recommendations to enrich the event and make the most out of it. I wish you all success in your deliberations and fruitful outcomes, and thank you for your kind attention. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Excellency Ambassador Brahit. His Excellency Ambassador Brahit summarized the efforts done by Saudi Arabia in supporting refugees and displaced people all over the world, with specific focus on OIC member states. He stressed also on the challenges alluding from the vulnerable situations in which we can find refugees and displaced women. He also highlighted the normative, operational, and policy roles played by OIC, which WDO will benefit, of course, from and build on together with the OIC Secretariat, IDP, and other sister organizations from the OIC system. Finally, of course, we join His Excellency's call to support the capacities of women, refugees, and displaced. Thank you very much, Ambassador Brahit, again. And we will go directly now to Mr. Al-Mu'izz Ismail Muhammad, Senior Fragility and Resilience Specialist, Resilience and Social Development Department at the Islamic Bank. Mr. Mahmoud, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Distinguished participants, keynote speakers, panelists, and colleagues. Allow me to begin first by extending special thanks for the invitation to participate in this side event with my colleagues from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and Women Development Organization. And I would like to commend the choice of the important topic of the side event of today. The Islamic Development Bank is a specialized institution of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and operates as a South-South cooperation multilateral development bank in 57 member countries spanning over 4 continents. Throughout its operation, the Islamic Development Bank has been paying great attention to the challenges posed by fragility in the development assistance it provides to its member countries. Since 28 out of the Islamic Development Bank, 57 member countries are experiencing fragility context as per the 2020 report of Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development on the status of fragility in the world. More concerning, out of these 28 countries that are experiencing fragility, 14 member countries are experiencing protracted fragility. We all know that fragility inevitably leads to negative outcomes such as violent conflicts, breakdown of institutions, displacement, and humanitarian crisis. With regard to violent conflicts, a number of OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and Islamic Development Bank member countries are already affected by violent conflicts with grave human cost in terms of mass refugee flows and internal displacement. In this context, the Islamic Development Bank has developed its interventions and policy frameworks, particularly its women empowerment policy and fragility and resilience policy, to address the challenges facing vulnerable groups in fragile and conflict-affected situations. Pillar 3, specifically of the women empowerment policy, calls for the bank to promote women's agency and participation and invest in interventions that foster women's role as agent of change in building community resilience to climate shocks, conflicts, and all forms of crisis. The Islamic Development Bank ensures women have the means and opportunities, which includes addressing gender-based violence and the provision of local services and infrastructure through inclusive development programs. With regard to its fragility and resilience policy, the Islamic Development Bank sets standard in addressing fragility and conflict through contributing to social cohesion, building resilience and sustainable development in member countries. As per the policy of the Islamic Development Bank on fragility and resilience, the bank acts on awareness and understanding of the interaction between intervention and the context to mitigate the negative impact and to do no harm while intervening and to maximize positive impacts of the intervention. The Islamic Development Bank also recognizes the significance of the humanitarian development peace nexus and supports refugee hosting communities through programs that strengthen social cohesion between refugees and host communities. Since its inception, the Islamic Development Bank Group has provided over $2.6 billion to tackle the challenges of fragility and conflict in 40 member countries and Muslim communities in 19 non-member countries. That was done through programs and projects, including the provision of skills development and smart education for over 700,000 refugees, internally displaced persons and host communities in countries like Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey. The Islamic Development Bank produces several knowledge products such as the fragility and resilience assessments, and has also produced the first resilience report of the bank and is now preparing the second resilience report, which is due to be launched this year. The bank also produces the Islamic Development Bank, has produced the Islamic Development Bank of 2021, which was specifically addressing the impact of COVID-19 on forced displacement and economic migration and economic migrants in fragile contexts. These knowledge products provide insights and guidance to the bank intervention in supporting female refugees and women in fragile and conflict situations, and increase the knowledge and capacities to support member countries to manage risks and shocks, both posed by human-made and natural disasters. Finally, I would like to emphasize that our partnership and collective resolve is important to support and empower refugees and displaced women. The topics, again, I reiterate on your agenda today for discussion are all important to achieve the self-reliance and ensure decent living for women and girls in conflict zones. Thank you, and I wish you a fruitful discussion and exchange of experience today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahmoud, for the very, very informative presentation on the diverse and comprehensive interventions and programs on the ground, which the IDP is presenting to refugees and displaced, with specific focus on the specific needs also of women and girls refugees. So thank you very much again. And if you allow me, distinguished guests, now to quickly introduce our diverse panel of experts who will be speaking to us from a global perspective about what it takes to empower women and girls in post-conflict situations, targeted interventions, best practices, and policy recommendations to this effect. Of course, speakers have a maximum of 8 minutes for their interventions. And on our list, our first speaker at the panel will be Ms. Maha Katta. She's a senior resilience and crisis specialist for the Arab States of ILO, Regional Office of Arab States, supporting mainly Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Syria. She is also ILO's country coordinator for Iraq, responsible for providing policy advice, technical advisory services, programs and project development, and leading applied research in the field of employment, rich and decent work, driven crisis responses. Ms. Katta's intervention will focus on the impact of social norms on women access to labor market and mainly women refugee, and how to influence policy change that enhances women refugees access to labor market. Ms. Katta, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for giving me this opportunity to participate in such important panel. And also thank you, dear Fatma, for the introduction. Of course, I mean, as ILO, you know, ILO is an organization, a tripartite organization. So we have in our organization the government and social partners represented. So we have workers' unions, employers' organization, in addition to government representatives. And in that sense, I mean, ILO through the history was the first to support women participation in the labor market. Of course, as you know, I mean, globally, women access to labor market is always had barriers. And if we look at our region, so these barriers are even more critical and more difficult, which prevent or at least make very difficult for women to access to labor market or to access to formal labor market and decent work. The ILO in 2017, they issued the recommendation 205 on employment and decent work for peace and resilience. So this was not the first, because before this recommendation, we had actually a recommendation in 71. And this recommendation actually replaced that one, because we recognize that we need new tools, new norms to cover the resilience work in the world. And this recommendation was the first step towards more engagement in crisis context and in fragile states. So since 2016-17, ILO managed really to develop a great tools and methodologies to reach out to women and see how, supporting women in the labor market. I can focusing now on our region in Arab states. As you know, the women participation rate in our region in Arab states is very low comparing to other regions. And when we look at what prevents women to access to employment, to skills, to entrepreneurs, so we have different barriers. So I can list them. For example, we have legal barriers, we have family barriers, social barriers, and economic barriers. So here, what we are, mentioning as barriers is everything that really prevent women to access to not only to work, but to decent work. Let's take the example of Jordan, where we have the participation rate, the economic participation rate for women in general in Jordan is around 17%. And when we look at refugee women and ILO, we conducted an assessment on to see, for example, what is the percentage of Syrian women, Syrian refugees women who are in the labor market, or at least they are active, either employed or looking for jobs. So it's even less than 17%. So women are facing challenges, but then when it comes to refugee women, it's even more difficult for them to get to the labor market. I can give you one example. When we started our program in Jordan, and in response to Jordan Compact, helping Syrian refugees to be integrated in the labor market in Jordan. So we worked on supporting, refugees in general to enhance the legal framework where they can then access easily to the labor market. One of the example there, when we wanted really to support a group of women, they want to become, they train to be as plumbers, and they are Syrian women. So we face difficulties to help them to get work permits, to work formally in the labor market in Jordan. And when we looked at and we digged in why they are not able to get work permits, it's under protection, by the way. Women should not work in construction for, this legal frame saying that this is like hazardous work for women. So they should not work in construction sector. And this is one of the barriers, because here under protection terms, so we are preventing and putting additional barriers for women to access to labor. Because for us, construction is not, we cannot say women cannot work in construction, because in construction, you have different occupations, and some occupations are not really hazardous for women, so they can work. So and then, with the Ministry of Labor, social partners, we managed to advocate for their rights really to work as plumbers. And it was one of the success stories. When we look at, for example, social norms, we have in Jordan, we have two big camps, one Zaatari, it's called Zaatari, and the other one is Iphrc. So at the beginning, it was really very difficult to convince the family to send, women to work in the garment factories nearby the camps. For them, going outside the camp for another work, they don't know this word, and this is really very risky. And they don't trust really that word. So what we did is really organizing a kind of visits for the family to those factories where they can see, I mean, the environment inside the factory and how other women are working in those factories and how they will gain skills, and then they will be able to be more active and also helping the family with income. And based on that, really, we managed to place more than, I mean, 500 or 700 women in those factories. So, I mean, family barriers, as you know, I mean, women, they have children. How we can help them if they have children to go and get skills and access to employment. So childcare facilities is really one of the most important aspects we look at, even in the labor laws. I mean, how to make, I mean, the workplace is safe for first, and second, how to make it really inclusive, and third, also be really, I mean, gender responsive, gender sensitive. And here we are talking about childcare facilities, etc. So again, women in the labor market, we need a lot of awareness about their rights, because if we have men, I know, I mean, decent work conditions in general in our region, so we have issues about that. But when it comes to women, it's even the worst, because women, they don't know about their rights, because they don't have the right source of information, I mean, to get about their contract, their wages, working hours, etc. So they need to be empowered by information and to be able first to negotiate their contract, I mean, to negotiate their wages. And this is also should be part of any training. I mean, skills, vocational training is important, entrepreneurship is important, but also empowering women when it comes to find a job, so they can even be strong enough to and to get, I mean, their rights, their labor rights. I don't know. I mean, I think I don't have time, but really, I mean, if I have additional opportunity where I can explain more about some good practices we have in Iraq, in Jordan, in Lebanon, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Katta, and thank you so much for your practical insights and recommendations for building the capacities of women, refugees, and displaced. You tackled on very specific interventions, including enhancing their access to the labor market, taking Jordan as a clear success story for these interventions. You highlighted also, or you stressed on a very important topic, which is awareness raising for women and their rights. And this is also what WDO will focus on, and the whole, in fact, the whole OIC system is focusing on currently. So thank you very much. And of course, we will have more opportunities, maybe in the question and answer part, for you to elaborate more on the other experiences. Now, allow me, distinguished guests, to call on Dr. Hannah Omar, the Director of Community Support, King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center. At the King Salman Relief, Dr. Omar manages the implementation of humanitarian projects and supports education protection, early recovery, and agriculture in vulnerable communities around the world in partnership with the UN and other international organizations. Dr. Omar, could you please describe the areas of work of the case relief in supporting women refugees and equipping them with tools for skill development? And what are the key lessons learned, best practices, and challenges identified during the implementation of the key case relief projects with regards to women empowerment? Dr. Omar, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. First, I would like to thank the Saudi mission in New York and OIC for organizing this important event, and to highlight, the importance of the capacity building for female refugees. So first, we live in the world, unfortunately, where the refugee crisis is increasing, and they suffer from very dire humanitarian situations. And as His Excellency Ambassador Tarek mentioned, half of these refugees are women and children. And these women, they suffer more, and they are exposed to many exploitations, whether it's sexual violence, whether abuse in the labor market, as my colleague Maha just mentioned, and also they can be used for other purposes. So why? The question is because they are the most vulnerable in this situation. And also I would like to highlight that also girls, are struggling when they become refugees, because they are basically the first who drop out from school. So here, for King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center, our vision and mission is to become a leading center for relief and humanitarian activities. We work closely with implementing partners from the UN, from INGO, NGOs. And why? We work as partner because it's important for us to study the geographical locations, to study the needs for specific for each specific project. And it's important to know the needs before you go and do the interventions. So for the need, as also Maha said, sometimes would be very simple, like to have a child care facilities. So this will help the women to go to the work. For us, we encounter many situations that women, they can work and they would like to have the opportunity, but also they have certain problem. So we need to build this bridge between the opportunities and the access to work. So what we can do is to study the needs for each project. So protection, we found out that protection should be implemented in any projects for capacity building, because they need legal assistance. Sometimes they don't have the paperwork after they fled their countries. So even for IDPs, not only for refugees. And also sometimes they need mental health assistance, psychosocial support. So, and also the violence against women. So we need to tackle these issues to make sure that these women are independent, are able to work, so they will be ready to be integrated to be reintegrated to the societies, and also to tell her about the opportunities. Sometimes they don't know about these opportunities. They are very fragile. They are in the camp, so they don't know what they can do. So for KS Relief, we work with the organization to have specific project for women, and especially for refugees and IDPs. So in general, we have more than 260 projects to help refugees in general. And of course, part of that for women, because we work also in compliance with the humanitarian principles. So our projects are neutral. So if there is refugee, they can apply to these projects too. And for refugee specific, we have over 200 projects with the cost for over 800, actually for the IDPs for 800 million. So we have different projects that targeted the specific needs in the geographical location in many countries. And for us, it's important to study refugees and also IDPs because they suffer from similar circumstances. And also, I would like to reiterate the importance of knowing the root causes for the society that the female refugees cannot work or cannot build their own capacities. And also, we found that sometimes the stigma, the fear to go outside of their own society, for example, in the camps. And what we offer. So what we offer the shelter, clothes, food, and also some projects to make sure that they are integrated properly in the society. We provide the legal services and also the empowerment and project to make sure that they can have economic opportunities where they can have income. So for this project, we have two different situations. We have for refugees inside the camp and outside the camp. And actually, my colleague in Islamic Development Bank raised an important issue, which is the social cohesion. It's very critical now to build the social cohesion. So now we make sure when we empower women, refugee women outside of the camp, we make sure that we also help the host communities, because we have to give them like similar opportunities, so they feel they are the refugees is here, so they can have these opportunities. Because the situation now, especially after a COVID pandemic, is worse. So we have to build also the host community and to let them accept the presence of the refugees. And also we train the trainers and also the people, and also the government, the officials, when they deal with refugees and in specific project. So actually Maha mentioned also the Zaatari camp. For Saudi Arabia, we have the Saudi Center inside the Zaatari camp. They provide services for women and especially training. So I visited this center personally, and I was amazed by the skills that they have. So it's also not only for capacity building, but also for social life. They were happy inside the camp to have these opportunities to talk to each other, to have some products, and they can sell it. And I know that UNHCR had the Made in Zaatari initiative. So we are trying to help them to be part of the community, even if they are inside the camp or outside the camp. So when it comes the lesson learned, what we learned in KS Relief, it's really important to hear their voices. You can't have an appropriate interventions if the refugee woman is not part of the needs assessment or the intervention decision making. And also, I am pleased today to discuss this topic with valuable partners like UN Women. I know Ikram, we work together in Yemen, and also with the OIC, but in different projects, especially for education. So it's really important to focus and emphasize on the involvement of women in the host community, and also to hear from the female refugees. The other part is to have the holistic approach, is to know what are the reasons that these women cannot go to work, and what are the opportunities that we can offer to these women so they can work, because the demands are different and vary from location to location. The other thing is to have more support for small income generating activities. This is important because I met some Syrian refugees. They said, we have the best skills now, but we don't know how to market our products. We don't know how to market our skills. The good thing now with technology, some of them, they know computers, they know, creating apps and something like that. So they can sell it online. So at least this is an area where we can also work more to make sure that they have their own income. And also awareness. It's really important to raise the awareness about women's rights, about the opportunities, and maybe Ikram can elaborate more about that, especially in Yemen. We have projects, we don't differentiate between the IDPs and the host community and the community, and also the refugees. And for example, in Somalia, one of my colleagues visited our project with NRC, and for training women to build their capacity. And we didn't say it was for refugees, but when she went there, we found Yemeni refugees. We have refugees from other countries in Somalia. So the good thing is to have the opportunities for all, with the focus on the female refugees. This will help her to be reintegrated, and also to help to build the social cohesion. And for the advocacy, I will go back to that, because it's really important to understand the cultural barrier and also the society in order to have the appropriate interventions. We had some incident where the interventions weren't studied properly, so we couldn't engage more female refugees. So it's really important to know the barriers, and if it's something that we can overcome, advocacy will play an important role to help this community. And the last thing I would like to focus on is localization. We work with the UN, INGO, NGO, but we want to make sure that in each project that people from this geographical region work in this project, because they understand the needs, they also empower themselves, and to have the income through the funding that we provide, especially in big projects. And last thing I would like to say is the strong community means a sustainable peace and also sustainable development. And of course, as His Excellency Mr. Al-Atiq said, women is an important part of the family of any communities and also for the future of these vulnerable communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Omar, for the very informative presentation from the field, from your great experience in the field. You highlighted the vulnerabilities which women, refugees, and displaced are exposed to. You stressed also on the component, on the issue of the protection component during different capacity building interventions. You tackled also or you highlighted the importance of tackling the root causes for the vulnerabilities which women, refugees, and displaced are exposed to. You also tackled the challenges relevant to the rehabilitation and the reintegration processes to the women displaced and refugees. You didn't forget also about the lessons learned. And you said that there is an importance to the focus of amplifying the voices of women, refugees, and displaced. You called for more income-generating activities for women, refugees, and displaced, more awareness raising and advocacy, more funding for this, and more sustainable peace and development. Thank you very much, Dr. Omar. And now we are going to, at this point, to call on Ms. Ikram Al-Houni. She is the Senior Humanitarian Advisor for the Arab States of UN Women. Ms. Al-Houni also, she leads the Regional Humanitarian and Resilience Portfolio. Her presentation today will provide an overview of the UN Women Refugee Response programs in the OIC countries. Ms. Al-Houni, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm very happy to be here to share UN Women's experience around strengthening the resilience of refugee women and girls in the Arab States region. And I will probably be touching on a lot of things that my colleagues, the fellow panelists, have touched on. So I'm happy to see that. May we please go to the second slide? Thank you. So, you know, there is something to be said for the Arab States region having a range of diversity, but unfortunately having being one of the most crisis-prone regions in the world. And I think those are things that you are all quite well aware of. Many countries have either experienced direct conflict inside the region, some of which for decades, and they've also been impacted by the spillover of certain conflicts as well. So I, you know, could name Iraq, Libya, Palestine, Syria, and Yemen for those that have experienced direct conflict, and then others that have absorbed, you know, refugees, particularly Syrian refugees, as a result of the spillover of the Syria crisis in Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey, of course. And so, you know, we are aware that these crises have exacerbated vulnerabilities of not only refugees, but also internally displaced persons, as Dr. Omar has highlighted, and whose communities in these countries. The situation for women and girls has been indicated by many of you is challenging, particularly in the Arab States region. So even before these crises, the region has had pretty persistent, deep-rooted patriarchal attitudes and stereotypes with regards to roles and responsibilities that have discriminated against women and girls. As a result of that, gender inequality and heightened risk of exploitation and violence, as well as the ongoing COVID outbreak, they have further challenged how we address gender gaps and the unequal distribution of socioeconomic burdens in the region, and they've contributed to the fragility inside the region. All in all, we are well aware that inside the region, we have over 19 million women and girls that are in need of assistance. UN Women's approach for responding, as you can see from this screen, marries both protection and economic resilience programming so that we meet the needs of vulnerable women affected by crises. And we use primarily a corporate flagship program, Women's Leadership, Empowerment, Access and Protection and Crisis Response. And inside the region, we basically refined this model so that we can really meet the most urgent of needs for women and girls by increasing their capacities for learning, expanding their opportunities for income generation, which many have already highlighted as very important, while at the same time combating sexual and gender-based violence. The model is multi-sectoral, and it places women's human rights, their gender equality, their resilience at the center. So we can indeed seek to attain peaceful and gender equal societies. So that's the ultimate goal. The model has evolved over the years, and it has really become critical for building women's resilience and empowerment through multi-sectoral service provision. So you can see here, we have several entry points. And before I forget, we've also engaged men and boys on gender equality and the empowerment of women so that we can foster a conducive environment to build women's resilience in their households and their communities. We enter through protection and women-only centers. We've partnered with governmental counterparts and women-led civil society organizations so that women that are at risk or subjected to gender-based violence can be provided with assistance. And the examples you can see below: psychosocial support, referral services, and legal counseling. And we basically pair that with economic employment opportunities. And before we begin those economic empowerment opportunities, we start with skills development, and those can be prerequisites to be able to avail of the economic resilience opportunities. And ideally, what we want to do with the skills development is ensure that it's tailored to market demand, that we offer it to the most vulnerable of women, and that these skills that they attain are marketable and hopefully transferable. And then we move over to short-term and longer-term income generating opportunities. We've got, as many others have also done, either shorter-term cash for work interventions that enable women to temporarily generate income for shorter periods of time of up to 3 months, and they cater to several sectors such as tailoring and gardening and other sectors. The other space is through grants and entrepreneurship, where we give vulnerable women increased access to credit facilities, helping them to foster their economic independence and get them to engage a little bit more in local markets. And again, we work with these women that have either existing businesses or startups in a range of sectors. Last but not least, we also work with colleagues like the ILO and others to address female unemployment. And UN Women collaborates with the private sector so that we can look at providing decent longer-term employment opportunities for these women. And we offer them guidance and mentorship, career counseling, and help to place them across a range of sectors such as finance and administration and food production and education and other spaces. May we please move to the third slide? I'm quite aware of time. Now, as we have worked to strengthen the impact of our programming for these women and girls affected by crises, we've found that evidence generation is very important for the programs that we design, because we need to build them so that they strengthen the resilience and capacities of women and girls to manage shocks and stressors. And so in this regional office, since 2018, we've been measuring the resilience of vulnerable women in protracted crises, both internally and with external partners. We have an approach that helps us measure the impact of our resilience programs through the cash-based interventions. We make sure it's participatory. We engage regularly with the beneficiaries throughout the project implementation cycle, and we are heavily dependent on the feedback of the women in this program so that we can place the principles of accountability to affected populations at the core, at the heart of the monitoring. We have rolled out this monitoring across 5 countries, and I'll just show you a little bit how that's worked since we've rolled out the programming. And it's in Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, Palestine, and Yemen, and we've carried that out with support from the implementing partners. The data we have collected, as you can see, has helped us realize that resilience is a multidimensional concept. So it is affected by women's abilities to access basic services such as education, employment, and protection, their abilities to generate income, to generate assets through employment, their increased well-being and confidence, and how supportive and conducive of an environment do they have for their employment. So once we tackle the challenges that women are facing, we see an improvement in their overall resilience. And as I said before, we know it's a multidimensional concept, resilience. It requires a multidimensional approach, and it has a multidimensional impact. And we see it from our programming in 4 areas: livelihoods and the abilities to meet basic needs, women's basic needs and the needs of their families. Another area is their abilities to take decisions for themselves or to influence joint decisions to a large extent. A third area is their improvement in their own well-being, in their confidence, in their self-belief, in their outlook, positive outlook for the future. And last but not least is their tolerance, women's tolerance to gender-based violence. Can we move to the next slide, please? This is just a snapshot. I do not expect people to actually be able to see what's in there. The data, it's just to give you an idea that the data that we have collected so far suggests that there are disparities in what resilience means for different women. Refugee women, displaced women, host community women. It basically confirms that, as I said before, it's not the same for all women. And the factors that determine resilience are also not the same. So we have that. And we also know that the context-specific trends are different in different countries. So I'll just give you one short, sweet example. In countries like Iraq, Turkey, Palestine, and Egypt, women's resilience is highly influenced by what we are calling assets and adaptive capacity. And assets means their ability to generate income, women's abilities to generate income or own productive assets. And adaptive capacities is basically access to education, acquiring skills, and having intra-household support for employment. So it's just to say that our monitoring work is giving us a much better idea of how women deal with shocks and stressors, and how do we try to then better address their immediate and longer term needs so that we can strengthen their resilience. Shall we move to the next one? Thank you. Since 2018, under our resilience programming, you can see here, we've supported over 77,000 women strengthening their resilience. And as a result, indirectly, we've also had an indirect impact on over 402 household members. Using our monitoring approach, our gender-sensitive resilience monitoring approach, we have used that to help us generate evidence on the impact of the programs across the beneficiaries in their different groups. And as a result of that, we've refined the service delivery model and improved our efficiency. We are showing you here, how the data has helped us do that. What else does this data tell us? It tells us that we know tackling resilience is multidimensional as a concept, and it needs multi-sectoral interventions. That is an approach that works. We can give greater opportunities to amplify and sustain results we can help through meeting urgent livelihoods and protection needs of vulnerable women and girls affected by crises, these refugee women, through the programs that we have. And that helps them sustain and strengthen their resilience and maintain independence for good periods of time. We also are seeing that we need stronger investments in longer term opportunities, such as job placements and grant and entrepreneurship support to produce stronger results and more sustainable results. If it's okay, the very last slide, and then that should be it. For us to be able to ensure that we have synergies as part of the, the response framework mechanism and the UN system and the humanitarian response system, we are using a three-tiered approach so that we make sure we're not overlapping also with similar programs in this response. We are active members in the case of the Syria crisis with the regional refugee and resilience plan to the Syria crisis at regional and country levels. We contribute, through different mechanisms, and UN Women, for example, also leads the development of the gender component of the 3 RPs, regional needs overview and strategic overview, so that we can then help give that required technical guidance, influence the planning, implementation, and monitoring of the refugee response. Our second approach is through the targeting modalities. We have robust partnerships with the governmental counterparts, and also, of course, with UNHCR, so we can identify the most vulnerable women through an established criteria and use and ensure that they participate in the required protection and livelihoods components of the programs that we carry out. And then the third approach is through our unique implementation model, where we work, and we're very, very proud to be working with established women-led community-based organizations. We partner with them to bring a unique complementarity to the implementation modalities of our programming. These partner women-led women rights organizations, they also form part of the NGO networks on the ground. So they are part of the systems and referral systems and other systems within their communities and governorates and nationally across the region. I'm going to stop here, and of course, very happy to answer any further questions, and thank you once more for letting me contribute today. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Ikram. This is very interesting. You tackled at the beginning the socio-economic barriers which women, refugees, and displaced are faced with. And you gave us, you explained eloquently the program in the Arab states resilience building model, which is mainly developed on the basis of market-driven skills and opportunities. You highlighted also the importance of indicators, monitoring and evaluation of any intervention, including the use of the model which you presented. You stressed also on the issue of on the importance of strong and long-term investments and the involvement of all stakeholders. So thank you very much, Ms. Elhouni. And now let me present directly Mr. Morshid, who is the Senior Director, BRAC Bangladesh. He leads the Advocacy, Innovation, Monitoring, Evaluation, Accountability, and Learning Cluster of BRAC, one of the largest anti-poverty organizations in the world. Mr. Morshid, could you please discuss how BRAC addresses the most pressing needs of refugee women and girls in Bangladesh? What are some of the ways to ensure their financial stability, Additionally, what are the challenges faced while implementing your projects with female refugees, and what efforts and mechanisms do you put in place to address and or overcome such challenges? I call on Mr. Morshid, and please be concise, precise, and to the point, since you have 8 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Morshid. And please, I call upon all the attendees, if you have any questions, to write down in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You will find it. Please push it or stress on it, and write your questions so we can take it after the panelists speak. Thank you so much. Mr. Morshid, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Fatima. And it was such an honor to be present in this discussion organized by OIC, ISDB, and the UN Development Organization. The discussion so far was also enlightening for me. Many of the points that the panelists discussed are so relevant, but probably I'm going to talk it from the ground up perspective, not from top down, because I'm one of the few panelists here who is actually working on the ground, especially in Cox's Bazar, where nearly 1 million Rohingya refugees are hosted. So, the world is now living in an era of prolonged refugee crisis. It's no longer a 2-year, 3-year crisis. The average life has gone beyond 20 years. And I think the world as a whole is reeling with this, struggling to address this problem. I'll come more to that when I'll be discussing challenges. So yes, I agree. BRAC does all the skills development, economic empowerment / resilience projects that is being discussed. We have our training centers. There are 14 training centers within the Rohingya camps, which trains women in various trades, including tailoring, fixing electronic equipments. So and producing things that is used in the camp, like charcoals that people use for fire. And then we also have a interesting aquaculture project. There are 300 small ponds in the camp, which is now being used for aquaculture. And the women led these projects, and the fish produced therein are either consumed by the camp, and also they sell a small portion outside the camp. There are adolescent clubs where also we are teaching the young girls and adolescents, like computer skills and so on, that they can use once they are back, when they are back in their home country in Myanmar. And of course, on the protection side, we have a full range of services, including women-friendly centers, so exclusive centers for women, for adolescent girls, legal protection services. Awareness, one of the areas that I haven't heard today is the protection needed in the WASH facility, water sanitation and hygiene facilities. So these are all there now. Since I have, only 3-4 minutes left, let me just focus on the challenges, because the programs everywhere is probably almost the same. Now, as I agree with Dr. Omar when she talks about health protection and mental health support, it's critical to create a positive atmosphere for women to join labor market. But social taboos, family taboos in the refugee community when they were in their country, they also carry that social structure with them. And breaking that initially requires a lot of trust building, because otherwise, refugees come to a new place where generally the trust factor is low, and convincing them that it's all right to come out and join work is a difficult challenge. And especially in case of this Rohingya communities, girls and young adults are not expected to come out of their home and work. So convincing them, we need to then create a cadre of Rohingya communication for development, cadre of around 1,200 young girls who actually agreed, were convinced, and they become our ambassador. They went home to home, house to house, the camp to camp, and tried to convince the girls to come out. But if you look at the overall picture, I think this one thing that needs to be considered is, if we all think about work for women, work for girl, the relief is also given to a woman, that doesn't automatically make the girl or the woman free from their other responsibilities of child bearing, of their homeworks. So we also realize at one point of time that maybe we are putting them under too much pressure, to pushing them to do their home, the family work, and then also giving them the work, only women work for only women, cash for work program only for women. And then we realize that there needs to be a balance brought out, and there, as Ms. Mahak Khatta was talking about, we brought in men into this discussion. Now we have a community level organization who decides how the work will be distributed. We work with the men, engage them, and so that they agree to take some of the responsibility of family care, because otherwise it actually become another level of oppression on women. The second problem that we are facing in Bangladesh, and this is also being discussed, is there is this unresolved question about how much work should be distributed to the refugees vis-a-vis the host community. And in Bangladesh, the problem is, I think this is a very rare situation where the refugee camps are situated smack in the middle of the host community. So anything that you do inside the camp affect people outside, and vice versa. So we also saw, and we also realized that it is important to try and create opportunities for all those who are affected, not only refugees. So in case of Cox's Bazar, because of this 1 million Rohingya refugees coming and sheltering in Bangladesh, at least in 2 sub-districts, the locals become minority. And naturally, the Rohingyas require a fair share of natural resources and so on. So these have created a situation of unrest. So we BRAC, and we right now is the largest responder in Cox's Bazar as a national NGO. We are now taking care of both people inside the camp and outside, because otherwise it's difficult to maintain the level of cohesion which is needed in camps. But the other problem is, how do you kind of ensure that the available opportunities are at least at such level so that it doesn't create discontent inside the camp? Because in any refugee crisis, the hope is probably the largest commodity that every development NGO, development organization or NGO should create in the camp, so that, as we say, a camp is transformed into a community, not remain as a camp. Now, how much of that you need to do inside the camp so that it doesn't create discontent, and how do you prevent discontent spilling into activities which is not probably legal, like trading of drugs and so on. This is one fight that we are fighting with so many stakeholders inside the camp, including the security agencies, government bodies who are anti-narcotic bodies and so on, BRAC and other NGOs, along with UN agencies. We are trying to find a balance so that, it's difficult to go to government and say, now we will use cash-based economy. And then someday some person is apprehended with a lot of cash and who is doing illicit activities, and then government is basically come back and say, okay, so no cash from today. So this balance, I think this is where the advocacy should play a role, and all in the international dialogues, this use of cash, non-cash, e-voucher, I think this is still unresolved, and this is heavily affecting women refugees, because if you have cash, this is so much fungible. The woman having the cash is under threat from all the other actors by protect the cash. So this is an important dimension, I think, that we should discuss. And finally, what is equally important is to ensure that everything that is done for the refugee communities inside the camp is in line with what is being done outside the camp. Otherwise, a refugee operation can actually create as much discontent, so much discontent that it will be difficult to manage. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morshid. Mr. Morshid stressed on the global nature of the refugee crisis in the world. And again, he talked like our previous colleagues about the socio-economic barriers, but with specific focus on the refugees, on the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, and the extra burden put on women, and the importance of engaging women in the family, men in the family care. And he stressed also or highlighted the issue of the local unrest caused by changes in the demographic specificities of the region. And he finally stressed the importance of everything that should be done inside the camp should be done outside the camp, and the discussion will continue on that important topic. I will go directly, since we are very late now, I will go directly to our next last speaker, Ms. Asila Wardak, who is one of the independent human rights commissioners at the Independent Permanent Human Rights Commission of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Ms. Wardak is also a former diplomat and human rights and women's rights activist from Afghanistan, and one of the founders of Afghan Women's Network. Ms. Wardak, could you please give us a brief overview of the IPHRC work on empowering women and girl refugees from the human rights perspective? Ms. Wardak, you have 8 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fatima, and good afternoon, good evening to everybody, and then to the great panelists. Thank you for the opportunity. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The OIC Independent Permanent Human Rights Commission attaches great importance to the rights of women and girls, and has kept it one of its priority areas of work. Accordingly, it's a privilege to address this learned gathering and share IPHRC's views on the subject. I thank the organizer for the timely initiative for empowerment of refugee women and girls, requiring added protection and attention. I hope today's discussion will focus on reinforcing the institutional mechanism to safeguard protection, development, and participation rights of this vulnerable segment. Ladies and gentlemen, this debate is taking place at the crossroads of the largest movement of migrants and refugees since the Second World War, in which women constitute more than half. Women in the world in general, and Muslim women, in particular refugee women, are faced with multitude of challenges from within and without. Understandably, during the emergent condition of migration and conflict resulting in refugees movement, the normal mechanism that protect individual collapse under the stress of crisis. Since women are potentially more vulnerable to social, economic, and cultural exploitations, they bear the most brunt during such catastrophes. The violation of women's rights during these high-risk conditions not only have immediate life-threatening consequences, but may also impact on the resilience of communities and their ability to cope with emergencies. The resilience of communities and their abilities to cope with the emergencies, which in turn endangers the peace and stability of succeeding generations. These refugee women and girls are also mired by abject poverty, perpetual insecurity, and discrimination. Yet they are linchpin for the survival of their families. They also remain key players in sustainable development of their respective host societies and countries. Women migrants contribute to global economic growth and socio-cultural diversity as they fill labor diamonds and transit in distinct countries. Although themselves being victims of neglect and discrimination, these resilient women are quick to reassemble and move on to contribute positively towards rebuilding lives and societies. Therefore, they must be seen as rights holders and agents of development and not mere victims. As both migrants and refugee women have specific needs and vulnerabilities, it therefore necessitates implementation of human rights-based gender-responsive approach to safeguard the rights of women, in particular girls, during situation of migrations. There are also an urgent need for legislative action to ensure refugee women and girls have access to secure transit routes, safe spaces, promote and protection when they arrive in a host country, and resources and services that will help them to build a post-conflict life free from violence and poverty. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, since its inception, Iphrc had made concerted efforts to promote women's rights within OIC member states and beyond. Recently adopted Cairo Declaration of the OIC on Human Rights has placed special emphasis on the protection and promotion of women's rights in all settings. Iphrc has also contributed towards comprehensive review of the OIC adopted plan of action for the advancement of women in the member states APAO, and its implementation mechanism to include provision for undertaking all necessary preventive and protective measures to combat different forms of violence against women in armed conflict and post-conflict situations such as sexual abuse and human trafficking. The OIC member states are encouraged to promote the role of women in conflict resolution, peace building, and peacekeeping. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to unshackle women of the inertia of past. It is imperative to seize this opportunity to change the tone and tenor of the debate on victimhood of migrants and refugee women, and instead empower them to be a resilient agent for a change in action. Given the scale and enormity of the challenges, it's essential to promote safe and orderly migration as a means to increase women's access to education and economic opportunities, disrupt harmful gender stereotypes and practices, enhance their social and political participation, and promote gender-sensitive human development, enabling them to be free from fear, want, and violence. In this regard, transformation of domestic laws and legal frameworks are the most effective ways for bringing long-lasting changes and approaches. A combination of political will, advocacy, and legislative reform would emphasize on enforceability are needed to secure migrants' women's rights. The member states should implement their obligation under international human rights law. In particular, states are urged to implement obligation under the CEDAW conventions as further elaborated in General Recommendations number 26 on women migrant workers, and number 32 on the gender-related dimension of refugee status, asylum, nationality, and statelessness of women. The formulation of gender-responsive, right-based policies will respect, protect, and fulfill the human rights of women and girls, migrants, migrant workers, and women and girls refugees. The status may integrate the implementation of the legal obligation with the operationalize of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The New York Declaration of 2016 provides an excellent starting point for finalization of global compacts on migration and refugee to reassess national migration policies. The member states are urged to further intensify cooperation with the UN system in related entities to take all legislative, administrative, and other measures for implementation of the rights recognized in the International Covenant and Human Rights Instrument to develop policies in the best interest of migrants with special focus on women and girls. Lastly, there is need to promote institutional linkage between human rights bodies dealing with migrants' rights for sharing of experiences, expertise, best practices, policies, and capacity building programs. I'm hopeful that the outcome of this event will be instrumental in steering the destiny and direction of all Muslim women and all sitting towards nation building in developing societies where women are defined by their strengthening and progress contribution. Taking the opportunity as an Afghan woman leader and as a refugee, I would like to also thank for all your solidarity, supporting, hosting the Afghan people, and also especially Afghan women to their countries, especially those women that they were at risk. And this is the time to show more solidarity to every Muslim woman in the globe. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wardak. You highlighted the great normative role played by the Iphrc within the OIC system regarding women, refugees, and displaced, including, you talked also about the famous Cairo Declaration and its references on women, refugees, and displaced, and also the women human rights in international instruments. Without further delay, again, I want to thank the different panelists for the very useful insights, and will now open the floor for potential questions, concerns, and additions. I would like to suggest that questions should be directed to a specific panelist to facilitate this part of the session. And we will prefer to receive the first round of questions, then give the floor to our panelists to address them before going to the second round if need be. But if you allow me, colleagues, before opening the floor for questions, allow me to acknowledge Her Excellency Ms. Awatif Hayar, Minister of Solidarity, Social Integration and Family of the Kingdom of Morocco. Excellency Minister, you have the floor to give us some insights. Minister Hayar, yes, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam the Chair, Excellencies, experts, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I would like first to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Women Development Organization, and the Islamic Development Bank for organizing this very interesting panel. I would like to give very quickly and briefly some insights about the Moroccan experience in terms of refugees and migrant women's integration in the society and in job markets. As you know, in Morocco, we have achieved many large progress in terms of women condition and under the support of His Majesty, the King Mohammed VI, may God assist him. And all these achievements are open, covers, of course, women in refugees and migrants. They can, with their family and children, benefit from all social health care and support for free, like in a Moroccan in a vulnerable situation. Also, they can benefit from social services of the Entraide Nationale, which is national organization for multiform support. It's open for free, so they can benefit from social and, as I said, services for people in precariousness. And also they have benefited for free from vaccination during the pandemic, and the COVID-19 pandemic. And they can benefit from, as I said, social services in from 3,500 centers that are spread in all the regions of the kingdom, so they can access for free. And also, I would like to mention a very interesting initiative of the Declaration of Marrakech 2020, led by His Royal Highness Princess Lala Mariam, which combat the violence against women, including, of course, women refugees and migrants. And we have within this framework deployed what we call multifunctional spaces for women. And in these spaces we can give advice, low advice, and economic. We accompany women to integrate, to define professional projects and to benefit from capacity building program, which is we launched last week within the Declaration of Marrakech program, launched the Academy of Empowerment, which is like a community college that was launched in Morocco, open to women in a vulnerable situation. And they can, as I said, develop professional projects and benefit from incubators so that they can access job placement and connect to job replacement platforms deployed by Initiative National of Human Development. Just to conclude, all these infrastructure is open for refugees, women and female refugees and migrants. And this all this infrastructure is to help women to increase resilience and to accompany them for capacity building. Yeah, this is what I want to share with you. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for this very interesting webinar.
Thank you very much, Excellency Minister, for participating today in our panel discussion. Before closing, colleagues, I would like to give the floor to our panelists to answer one of the questions. We have a question here. Yes, I think it is answered already. So do we have any more questions? I think that the panelists can see the questions. What further efforts shall be performed to highlight the situation of female refugees in the work of CSW? And we had another question: how can the international community support refugee women in affecting conflict zones? And how do you see regular citizens' engagement? And another third question: many speakers dwelled on refugees in the camps. What specific actions can be geared towards urban refugees, those who decide to live in the sub and urban areas? And the last question: how can private sector address the needs of women refugees in the affected zones? How do you see the role of the private sector? Do I see any requests from the panelists to answer, to add on the answers already? Okay, so if I see no more.
Can I just
yes, please.
answer? Yeah.
Yes, please. You have the floor.
Maybe I can answer the last one on the role of private sector. It's really very, very interesting question because yes, as humanitarian development agency, so we used to work within our frameworks and tools, norms, etc. But the reality in the labor market sometimes is very different. Not sometimes, most of the times are different. So we need really to get the feedback from the actors in the labor market. And who are the actors? Private sectors, employers, workers, job seekers, etc. So getting the private sector to be part of any strategy for helping and building the capacity of women refugees is very important. I can again give an example from Jordan, but also from Iraq. So we are engaging with the private sector on apprenticeship model, where the private sector themselves can provide the training, the on-job training to women refugees, and also the placement later on. So it's a model of skills and job placement at the same time, which really, secure not only, providing skills, but then secure employment for women refugees. And it took us, for example, a while in Lebanon and in Jordan and now in Iraq, really to build the trust between the private sector and also, refugees, because for them, this is a new, job seekers in the labor market. They don't know much about them. They don't know about their skills, their capacity, their commitment to work. So also being that, providing these, intermediary services, Ikram mentioned employment services, and different colleagues that mentioned employment services, where we can really build the bridge between private sector employers and job seekers. And I think really, if we need to be successful in empowering women and getting them to the realities of the labor market, so we need to have strong partners from the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thank you so much for the answer. Is there any more requests for the floor?
Yeah. Can I go
please.
in? Just, yeah, the same private sector question. I think two things are important. One is, of course, private sector can be, and in our case in Bangladesh, is becoming an important source of job. But remember, we need to make sure that private sector does not see the refugees as a as a cheap labor, because these refugees have very little bargaining power. Their knowledge of worker safety and so on and so forth is not among the highest, and their ability to organize themselves and ensure that they get what they deserve is limited. So private sector, of course, but then the government and the responding agencies have a role to make sure that these sectoral involvement of the private sector is adequately moderated and ensure that this doesn't become another source of exploitation, if you may. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murshid. Is there, if I don't see any more requests for yes, please, Ms. Alhouni, yes, please.
Thank you so much. I hope for the first point on the CSW, I did give like a chunk of a reply. So if anyone has a follow-up question on that, please feel free to let me know. And then on the second point, which is which I also responded to, not a second question, but which was highlighting, and maybe some of maybe the way that we all shared it was we were dwelling on refugees in camps. And I have to clarify that particularly in the case of Syrian refugees across the 5 countries, that's not the case. We make reference to the work that all of us are doing in Za'atari and Azraq, but those are 2 camps in Jordan, and there, we have very limited number of camps in Lebanon, nothing in Egypt, Turkey, all of this, and Iraq as well. All of this work is both urban, which is very interesting actually, as well as in camp or in settlements, informal settlements, as they say in Lebanon or in other spaces. So the breadth of the way that we give this kind of support and assistance and programming in the context of the Syria refugee crisis is super interesting because of the range of spaces it covers. Over.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alhouni. If I don't see any more requests for the floor. I would like to thank all the panelists for this great discussion today. I would like also to extend our thanks as WDO to the OIC Secretariat who successfully organized this, and of course to the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and our sister organization ISDB for organizing this timely event. Our discussions, of course, will continue in other fora, including for the Women Development Organization on this very important topic. I wish you a successful CSW session and have a very good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.